Good morning, everyone. It is July the 9th. This is the Audit, Finance, and Administration Committee. Um, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. I will now commence a roll call. Please indicate your presence when I call your name. Councillor Brad Clark.
I am here.
Wonderful. Councillor Collins.
Present.
Councillor Ferguson.
Present.
Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Partridge.
I'm present, and I just want to note that I will need to step out for another board meeting around noon, so I'll be logging off. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know. Councillor Pearson.
Present.
Councillor Vanderbeek.
I'm present.
Good morning, all. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, there is an additional discussion item 8.5, which is the Citizen Advisory Committees and Electronic Participation during the COVID-19 emergency, which is FCS 20061 citywide. It's an outstanding business list item. And item 11.1, which is an amendment to the outstanding business list for the removal of that item.
Thank you very much, Clerk. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Any discussion on the agenda as amended? No, we require an electronic vote. Please indicate your vote now. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Are there any? Morning. Hearing none, great. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of June the 18th? Moved by Councillor Clark and seconded by Councillor Collins. Any discussion on those minutes? Hearing none, we require an e-vote. Please indicate your vote.
Madam Chair, I can't move that. I wasn't present.
Oh, thank you, sir. Moved by Councillor Vanderbeek and seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Clark.
My pleasure.
We're good? Thank you, Angela. That was carried. Communication items, we do not have any this morning. Consent items, we don't have any. Written delegations, there are none. Staff presentations, there are none. We are immediately into our discussion items. 8.1, Parkland Dedication Reserve Status Account. Status report as of December 31st, 2019. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve item 8.1? Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Any discussion on 8.1? Councillor Clark, may I hear from you now?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Is Mr. Zagaric present?
Yes, he is. Mr. Zagaric?
So the question I have is on page 2 of 5. If you could just briefly explain the over-dedication of land by developers. It says the stated balance excludes a potential liability.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning through you, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
I believe staff brought this issue before council either earlier this year or in 2019. When the city acquires parkland through negotiations with developers, because of the development proposal, the site plan. Occasionally, there is a requirement to acquire more land than is required under the Planning Act. And as a result, there's a negotiation process with the developer relating to the valuation of those lands. And the liability referenced in this report speaks to those outstanding negotiations. And that's why we note it as a potential liability subject to those negotiations and what is negotiated regarding the valuation of those lands. We account for those as a potential commitment against those reserves. So again, we're just trying to be holistic in terms of the reporting against the potential draws on those reserves. And what it relates to, again, is additional lands that are acquired beyond the minimum requirements around parkland dedication. And often it is just simply because of the development of those lands and the need to acquire a bit more land than is required.
So the liability then is a future liability, and we don't know what the exact number is. This is just the estimate.
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, we are conservative. So we make some assumptions around the valuation of the land per acre. You may recall, I believe in 2019, one of the negotiated developments was in Waterdown, and I believe that was somewhere in the area of $8 to $9 million of that liability figure. And so again, it's based on a staff estimate of valuation per acre, and it is generally a conservative estimate for the purposes of this report.
And is the land appraised based on it being parkland, Mr. Zagaric, or
Yep.
based on it being in a residential area and we're moving it to parkland?
Yeah. So through you, Madam Chair, it is not necessarily based on the highest and best use. It is based on the form of or the state of the land. So irrespective of it being adjacent to a future developed residential, in the example of a residential, it is not based on highest best use in the form of residential development. It is based on a negotiated value reflecting that it would be used for passive land, parkland, rather than development.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to move the report if you wish.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, would you mind taking the chair for a minute? I have a very brief question for Mr. Zagaric.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Zagaric, on page 4 of the report, just as part of my education, it states that the municipality is now required to list those projects which have been funded by parkland dedication. Where do we find that explicit list? Through you.
Through the chair, I'm going to have to refer the question to Brian McMullen. He'll have a better understanding as to where that level of detail resides.
Thank you,
Mr.
sir.
McMullen, if you're there. Mr. McMullen, are you there?
I am. Just good morning. Just
there you go.
video
Good
on
morning.
yeah. So through the chair. So table 1 has some of the projects that were specifically funded from this reserve. And unfortunately, they were a lot of confidential land purchases of $3.9 million. So we'd have to go into camera to discuss what those were. So they previously had been approved by committee and council, specific land purchases.
Councillor?
Thank you, Brian. I wasn't sure when I saw table 1. I to be honest, I thought it looked really general, so I just thought there would be an itemized list, but that makes sense, and I appreciate your answer. Thank you. I can take the chair back now.
It's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any further discussion on that report? Hearing none. Great. We require an e-vote. Please indicate your vote. It's coming. It's up now.
Morning, everyone. It's Lorraine Kolar from the clerk's office. I'm just having trouble identifying one of the participants in the meeting. All I can see is the letter R. Can you, I believe it's staff, but can you just identify yourself, please, for the meeting?
Hi, it's Rafaela Morello.
Thank you, Rafaela.
That carries. Thank you, Veronica. 8.2 Development Charges Reserve Status Report as of December 31st, 2019. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve item 8.2? Moved by Councillor Partridge and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion on that item? Yes, Councillor Ferguson, please.
You, Madam Chairman, to Mike. Mike, I'm just going to try to scan down. It's on the chart on page 4. Adjusted balance shows a negative balance of $154 million. First of all, can we do that? Can we spend money we don't have? And secondly, how concerned should we be about a negative balance in the DC funds?
Mr. Garrick.
So through the chair, and I appreciate the question because I believe this is an amendment that we introduced a few years back as it relates to providing this additional information in this annual report. The purpose for Table 1 is to identify to committee and council the value and the financing and the outstanding financing for all of the growth-related projects approved by council relative to the DC balance. As it relates to the question, is this an acceptable practice as it relates to approving the projects? Yes, because council approves these projects with a corresponding financing plan. The purpose for Table 1 is simply to identify if the city had to, and I'm not sure under what circumstances the city would find itself in the position of having to proceed with all of the council approved growth related projects and completing them immediately. So if they all had to be initiated and completed in 2020, what the outstanding financing would be outstanding relative to the reserve balances. So again, it's just to provide an indication of the remaining financing that's required for all of the projects that are included in the appendix to this report. Committee will be familiar with the staging of development, and so finance works along with development as it relates to the staging of growth-related projects and the associated financing for that and prioritizing those projects. As well as there are a number of projects that are multi-year projects, Councillor, that would not realistically be initiated and completed in 1 year, and the financing having to be firmed up. So it's really there to just provide you an indication of the remaining financing that will be required for all of the projects, and you'll see there's an extensive list of projects in the appendix, and I will. I know I appreciate it wasn't necessarily the councillor's question, but it is referenced in the report. I'll make note that staff under our current environment related to COVID-19, we are working with development and planning as it relates to potentially amending some of our growth-related projects because of the pace of development and the impact that this crisis has had on the pace of development. So Brian advised me earlier this morning that we had assumed about $106 million in development charge collections for 2020, and year to date to the end of June, we are at $30 million. And so as a result, staff are reviewing the various council approved development projects to better align the projects with the development charge collections. So through the chair, I hope I've answered the councillor's question.
Yeah, I think you did, Mike, but I think the simple answer is that these are multi-year projects and you identify the expenditure will come sometime, but not necessarily in 2020. And it looks like the bulk and the big ones are all water, wastewater.
Yeah.
And that's probably the sewage treatment plant, a lot of that, a lot of the sewer program, because there's $90 million in lineal wastewater and $40 million in water services. So is this going to be spread over 2 or 3 years, or will it all occur in, say, 2021?
So through the chair, I would suggest it will be expended over a number of years, so beyond 2021.
Okay.
And again, it would be subject to the pace of development and our financing. So we work with the relevant departments based on our collections, development charge collections, and we may slow down some of these projects if the pace of development slows down.
Okay. Go ahead, Meg.
I was just going to say, as an example, is because of this crisis, we are having those internal discussions as it relates to having to revisit some of our 2020 approved growth-related projects.
Right. You're 30 million, yet you're expecting $100 million. That is a big difference as a result of the COVID-19. Burlington Road's SAC. I always thought SAC stood for Senior Achievement Center. What does that stand for?
It's through the chair, it's the special area charge. And so there were negotiations with the relevant developers as it relates to our Dundas water dam special area charge, as well as the access road special area charge. So again, these are specific agreements with specific geographic areas of the city.
Okay, thank you for that. And one more question, if you allow me, Madam Chairman, if I'm up to my 5 minutes, so I can come back on again. But on page 6, Mike, the Hamilton Conservation Authority, it looks like West End Home Builders, or formerly the Hamilton Home Builders, appealed the Conservation Authority funding capital projects through DCs, and it looks like LPAT ruled in favor of the home builders' appeal. What does that mean in capital dollars for the Conservation Authority, and will there be funding from other sources? You know, I know they're doing the Wild Waterworks painting this summer while it's closed. So how is this going to affect the capital projects, that decision for the Conservation Authority?
So through the chair, it would affect the financing, you know, where municipalities might have hoped to leverage some DC proceeds rather than capital levy proceeds. It'll translate into a greater reliance on capital levy funding.
Because they have a lot of work coming for the salt fleet development, and that's all new. It's all growth related. It's water retention, and I guess we can't appeal an LPAT decision. That's final.
Yeah. Through the chair, I'd have to refer that on to legal. I'm not sure if Nicole or someone from legal is on this virtual meeting.
Yes. Yes, Nicole is on, Mr. Zagarek.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just follow when the decision was issued. I apologize, I missed that part of the conversation.
I'm just trying to spot it now. You know, it was appealed in 2012. It looks like the decision was in 2014. The issue was also appealed on the same grounds for the 2014 City Hamilton DC bylaw. It looks like it's been ongoing for a while for growth-related projects for the Conservation Authority. But
so through you,
if I'm
Madam
reading the
Chair,
report right on page 6 under conservation, it looks like the last one was 2014.
So through you, Madam Chair, the time for appealing those decisions would have expired. However, if it's an issue that's ongoing, we may be able to look at whether that's part of the current bylaw, but I could speak to staff and get back to you on that.
Okay, because the Saltfleet development is going to be a big development. It's a large parcel of land to prevent flooding in Lower Stony Creek because it goes over the Devil's Punch Bowl, and we want to retain water up on top and reduce it slowly. So I'll take it up with Conservation Authority staff too, and maybe we'll have an offline conversation with either you, Nicole, or Mike, or both. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
No, it's wasting everyone else's time with them. Mike and I can talk later. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Clark, if I could ask you to take the chair for a moment. I just have 2 quick questions.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mike. Mike, I was just noticing that last year, for example, in Appendix A, we made a distinction between residential and non-residential, and we didn't do so this year. And I'm wondering why that was.
Mm-hmm. So through the chair, I'm going to have to refer that on to Brian or the report author.
Through the chair, let me just pull up, sorry, it's Brian here. Let me pull up the appendix. We can get back to you specifically on the differences. I don't know whether it was a case of just trying to save room, but obviously we have the balances by res and non-res reserves, and we can get that for you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I found it helpful. Just if you wanted to speak to on page 3, it states that staff are looking to develop a long-term sustainable strategy to fully address the backlogs. When might something like that come forward? Does it come forward during budget deliberations, or is it separate from that?
Yeah. So through the chair, it would be a separate policy discussion with committee. You will see in one of the appendixes, I apologize, I think it's Appendix D. It is Appendix D of the reports that through year-end surpluses over the last, I believe, 2 years, we've addressed about $15 million of the outstanding liability as it relates to exemptions. But given the crisis that we are in now, I don't expect year-end surpluses to be a opportunity in the medium term, short term, as it relates to these exemptions. So again, through the chair, we would report back through a standalone report, policy report.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. I'll take back the chair. Thank you, Councillor Clark. We require an e-vote. Please indicate your vote for report 8.2. That vote carries. Thank you. We're on to item 8.3, ward-specific funding initiatives update as of December 31st, 2019. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive this item? Moved by Councillor Johnson and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any discussion on item 8.3? Councillor Ferguson, please.
And I'll start with Mike, and he may have to deflect this off to somebody else. But if I go to Appendix D as in Don, if I go down to the minor maintenance Ward 12, it shows a balance of $1,139,000. Can I assume then, Mike, that the monies that was coming out of this account, it wasn't a great deal that's coming out of this account for the Ancaster Arts Center has already been withdrawn?
So through the chair, Brian may know the answer, or we can get the answer to you. I believe what we're reflecting here are the balances as of I'm going to make an assumption. Yeah, December 31st. So there are likely commitments against those projects or those funds, Councillor, for that project. And that may not be reflected in this report, but we do track those commitments. And maybe Brian can confirm whether or not there are still commitments against those funds.
The Arts Center was approved over a year ago, and generally you move the money right away over to the new fund where the council's approved it to come from. I just need to know, I got some sidewalk repairs I want to do, and do I have a balance of $1 million now?
So through the chair, it may be more effective if we take this offline and we follow up with the councillor as to what the remaining uncommitted balance in the minor maintenance accounts are.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Vanderbeek, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question goes to the very same appendix. I'm just wondering, I'm really wondering what the staff charges are about. $144,415 from each of our accounts, whether we spend money or we don't.
Mr. Zagarek, are you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So through the chair, I believe when these projects are put forward through the budget process, that Public Works sets a cost allocation. I believe it's 6%. I may be wrong as to what the specific value is. So as each capital project is submitted and approved through the budget process, there is a allocation of funds for staff-related costs. And I thought it was about 6% of the value.
Thank you, Mr. Zagarek. But the problem that I see is that we are the amount of money that goes into our account is 180,000 a year, and there's $144,415 coming out of everybody's account, according to what I see on this Appendix D for the year, which means we get $40,000 to spend. The way I look at it,
Yeah.
maybe there's another explanation,
Yeah.
but that wouldn't be 6% of the expenditures that we have, because everybody gets charged the same.
Yeah. So through the chair, again, I'll refer to Brian or the author who can maybe better speak to this table as to what the staff charges represents in terms of the valuation in the table.
Thank you.
Brian?
So
are you
yes,
able to?
through the chair.
Yes, thank you.
That appendix is a life to date on those projects that remain active. So that's why you'll notice in the life to date budget, the various wards 1 to 15, the numbers are not the same because of appropriations for projects that have been moved and funding that has gone to other initiatives and projects that have been closed. So the 144,415 is not just representative of 1 year; it's representative of some life to date charges.
So how are they all the same for every ward? It's the same amount in every ward here.
So this would probably, like I said, be a combination of, I think if you indicated it was 180,000 that you were receiving.
No, well, what I mean is that okay, so because we all get the same amount of money every year, there's the same staff charges every year. Is that correct?
Yes, and then so what remains though, through the chair, is that we can get back to you specifically with Public Works on that 144,000 and how many years of information that represents. But part of the challenge would be when the life to date budget would change because of the works in progress and projects that get closed. So we'll get back to you and talk to Public Works.
Okay, so is something coming back to Public Works on this? So through the chair, Brian, really what I'm trying to figure out is how is it that every ward has the same $144,415
Despite the activity.
Despite any activity, whatever goes in or whatever goes out.
So if I may, Brian, it sounds like it might be an answer that could be coming back to all committee members.
I think it should be.
Yeah, so through the chair, I'll offer that we can send back an email to everyone on the response through Public Works.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I'll accept that. It just seems funny to me. That's all. Okay. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you, Councillor Henderbeek. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, on the very same issue, first, I would prefer that the response come to the committee as an information report, because we're talking about this in public. And so sending out an explanation to councillors by email leaves the entire public out of the discussion, and we've been having this discussion in public.
Very good.
I have the same concerns as Councillor Vanderbeek with regards to the 144th. Setting a 6% chargeback automatic regardless of what is transpiring is problematic. I have anywhere between 4,000 and 7,000 sidewalks that need repaired in Ward 9. We have so many sidewalks that have lifted, shifted, cracked, and I'm not the only one. Every ward in the city is in the exact same boat. Thousands of sidewalks that we're trying to repair, but we're taking $2 million out of that repair for charges or chargebacks for staff, and I've got a problem with that. I candidly, Mr. Zagaric, I have some concerns about some of the chargebacks that we already are experiencing, and that it impedes the work that we're doing in this regard. So I'd like to have the answer in terms of where that's coming from, why that's like that, because $144 a year in every ward is a good chunk of sidewalks that we can continue to repair to get this infrastructure deficit under control for our sidewalks. And I would lastly mention, I recall the legal reports that we've had with risk management about trips and falls. So every sidewalk that is not being repaired because we don't have the money adds risk to the municipality for liability. And so we really need to concentrate on some of those priorities. So those are my only comments. This one item in this chart concerned me. Thank you.
It
Yeah.
seems sorry, Mike, I was going to say, it seems we have two asks here. One specific to this report, which perhaps illuminates a larger policy discussion and practice, which we need some help understanding publicly.
So through the chair, we'll report back, and to the chair's last comment is we'll make reference. There is a policy around chargebacks, so we'll make reference to that policy. But I suspect what that figure represents is a summation of staff charges for a period of time. But we'll provide that clarification through that information report. And I agree. We'll report back to committee so that there's a record as to what this table truly represents.
I'd appreciate that because it says as of December 31st, 2019. So my natural assumption from a financial reporting perspective would be that this was for 2019 only.
Yeah, understood. Through the chair, understood. And that was my confusion as well in terms of what that column represented.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Thank you, Mike. Councillor Pearson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly thank you, Councillor Vanderbeek and Councillor Clark. And that certainly is the line of questioning I had. And I know I've met with Brian in my office, and I questioned this actually at budget deliberations because we all know that under our minor maintenance fund that the outlying wards get, we were getting $200,000 a year. And that has been reduced to $180,000. And when I asked why all of a sudden we're only getting $180,000, it's because it's a 10% charge, that staff charge to do all the engineering, whatever the works have to be done for work, whatever we request to be done in the ward. That's what I was told. Brian's nodding his head because I remember that specifically because I had major issues going, well, you know, the pot's just getting smaller and I'm working desperately. Just like you, councillor and other councillors, I mean, you can see I commit pretty well $50,000 a year towards sidewalk repairs, just to help staff to get things caught up. Because when I'm backlogged 3 years in sidewalk issues, I've got a major concern with that. So I really would appreciate the clarification as to why this charge is in here as staff charge. And can you just enlighten me? When did we start getting? Because obviously my paperwork's at City Hall, but when did we start getting as the outlying wards the minor maintenance money? Was it 2014 or 2015? If someone can answer that.
Mr. Zagarek or Brian?
I can't recall the specific year that we started introducing these capital projects, but again, we can include that in the information
Please do.
report back.
I'd appreciate that because the initial it was, as I said, and I believe it's 10% is what we're being charged as far as any of the background works that staff have to do on anything we request. So again, thank you so much for raising this. I did raise it at budget time. It didn't pique anyone's interest, but now it is because we're seeing line dollar figures, and it is certainly tweaking. That's a lot of money. Thank you for that, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Ferguson for a second time.
Yes. Yeah, I think Councillor Clark asked a question. I'd like this to come back to AF&A also because it's fresh in our minds and it has been stated publicly. And I have a lot of questions around this, but they may be answered in an information report. So just to confirm, Mike, you will be bringing back an information report on this to AF&A?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. That's all.
Sorry, I was just offline there for a moment. Question was to Mr. Zagarek about bringing a report back. I'm wondering, Mr. Zagarek, if it would be appropriate for us. I'm looking to the clerks to have a motion to formalize that request so it doesn't get unintentionally lost. Okay. Would any member of the committee be interested in moving a motion? Councillor Ferguson, great. And there's a motion on the floor and it's seconded also by Councillor Partridge. Are all members of council understanding the motion? Right, and we still have Councillor Vanderbeek who's waiting in the queue. So clerks, can I go to Councillor Vanderbeek? Under Councillor Vanderbeek, would you like to speak to this item still, like the essence of the motion?
Well, I don't want to speak to the, I wasn't asking to speak to the motion that's up at the moment. So if you want to move the motion and come back to me with my question, I just have a quick question that had
Yes,
to do with the previous discussion.
thank you.
Or I can do it now, whatever you prefer.
Let's move the let's test the will of committee on the motion if you don't mind, and then I'll come right back to you.
Madam Chair, so is the motion the yes, in essence, we're referring this back to AFNA to get that additional information report? Because otherwise we're going to be receiving this, which in essence means we're accepting the report the way it's written and we have concerns about the report.
Thank. Just getting some counsel with the clerks.
No problem.
The intent of my motion, Madam Chairman, was to ask for an information report on Appendix D only.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're receiving everything else and then we're getting an information report back on D based on what Councillor Ferguson is asking. Is that correct, Lloyd?
That's correct. The rest of the report I'm fine with. It's just the information report on Appendix D.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciate the clarification.
Okay. Councillor Clark and Councillor Ferguson, if I may, clerks are still consulting. They're going to write something up. I'd like to go to Councillor Vanderbeek, then I'll come back with the wording that is being proposed by clerks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wasn't sure they'd unmuted me. One of the previous speakers mentioned that the outlying areas get the priority monies. I understood that all wards got the priority money. Is that correct? Or am I misunderstanding something?
Through the chair, just I turned off my camera just to go grab our 2020 capital budget book. So again, the minor maintenance is a allocation of $180,000 to each of the wards.
To every ward, all 15?
To every ward, yes.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. That was my only question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Not a problem. Thank you for asking. Oh, okay. Yes, I'm going to turn over the audio to Clerk Angela for a moment.
Hi, everyone. Just that the staff report be received and that staff report back to AFNA committee with further clarification around Appendix D, the council priority minor improvements. Is that what you're looking for? Just clarify that that's what they're looking for.
Members of committee, does that sound along the lines in which you were hoping the motion would read, the direction would go?
Can Angela read it one more time, please? Sorry.
Yeah. Let me figure out how to, oh, here we are. Yep, that the staff report be received, but that they report back with further clarification and information respecting Appendix D, the council priority minor improvements.
Councillor
That's fine. That's fine with me.
Councillor Ferguson?
Me also, and specifically around the staff charges, but Appendix D is fine.
I think I cut you off, Councillor Clark. I apologize.
But thank you.
Okay. Sounds like that's sitting well with everyone. The clerk is going to open the vote on that direction, that motion. Councillor Johnson, are you able to vote? Thanks, Ange. That carries. Thanks, everyone. Good discussion. So we need an e-vote on the report. Nope, we're good. We're all good. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, members of committee. We are on to item 8.4, which is the 2020 City Enrichment Funding Recommendations. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve item 8.4? Moved by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Councillor Johnson. Is there any discussion? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the only question I have, and I appreciate the report back, I want to make sure that we're not handing over taxpayer money to organizations who were going to hold events and they're not going to hold the events now because of COVID, but they still get the money that they were approved to hold the whole event without some type of evaluation as to the alternate event that they are suggesting. It's a little bit problematic for me personally that we approve it for an event. The event can't happen now, and it just automatically the money moves to an online event, which is not the same cost as running a large event. And I'm just concerned about the fairness in that process, and how do we make sure that we're not handing money over to people who aren't really going to be using the money for the purposes, and we're at a loss as a result.
Thank you. We have staff member Mimi John here to help us with any questions on this report. Mimi, are you there now?
Yes, I am. Through the chair to Councillor Clark and councillors, that's an excellent question. I'd like to clarify that as per the grants mandate and the guidelines, which we are following very closely, we have checks and balances. At the end of the CEF cycle, in line with every year, applicants have to submit a final report, which basically gives that check and balance back of what they've done with the dollars and if it's in line with what they have said that they're going to do. With COVID, particularly, we were able to provide a level of flexibility when COVID hit to work within the guidelines, to have applicants come back and say, we're modifying our program, we are going to change it to either fit within what their initial application said, or they modified the budget. And we have adjusted the funding rationale accordingly, so that we do have that check and balance at the end of the cycle.
So a hypothetical group, ABC,
yes,
plans to hold a big festival. They've been holding the festival for years. Now they can't hold the outdoor festival because of COVID.
mm-hmm.
So they still get the $100,000 and they get to decide where they're going to spend it.
That
sounds like what you said.
Okay, so to give you just a general example, we do have currently applicants who would have held an outdoor event with a lot of people, who have now successfully come back to the program managers, worked on a case-by-case basis with the program managers to say, we can modify our event so that it's virtual. We do not need that much dollars as we initially said that we required in our initial application. This is now our modified budget, and our funding allocation is now recalculated based on what their modified budget is. And according to our guidelines, that's 30%. There's a 30% cap on a total program budget. So that's how we would look at if a program has come back saying that they're modifying their budget. So we have many of our program applicants, it really is truly unique. So with the phased approach, which is what we're doing, which was council approved, we are actually coming forward with these set of recommendations, having worked with these applicants who have said we're either canceling or we are coming back and we have modified our program in this way. And we have worked with them to have that in line so that we can have that check and balance at the end. Is that a little more clear there, Councillor?
I may just have to take it offline because it's not clear to me. I'm struggling to understand exactly how we're being accountable for the money and how we're making sure that we're not handing over money that they're simply not going to be using.
Through the chair, Councillor Clark, it's also important to note that within our guidelines every year, as council approved, we do have it in our funding agreement that once funds are released, that they are utilized for what they are said that they will be utilized for. Any funds which are not utilized accordingly have to be returned. So we have that within our mandate and guidelines as well.
And so can I just ask one last question, Madam Chair? The total budget for the City Enrichment Fund.
Yes.
That we were going to hand out in 2020.
Correct.
Compared to what we are handing out in 2020. What's the variance?
I can't, it's because it's a phased approach. I can't give you a specific number right now. There will be remaining funds because we do have canceled events and the modified programming. So I can't give you a definite number on what that variance looks like at this particular time. I can give you a more specific amount towards later on in the year as we go through this phased approach.
Okay, thank you. I'll support it moving forward, Madam Chair, but I'll be monitoring it. I want to make sure that we're being frugal.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you,
Thank
Councillor Clark. Thank you, Mimi. Councillor Brenda Johnson.
Yep, thank you. As chair of the grants, I totally appreciate the former speaker's questions. They're nothing shy of what I had already asked Mimi. And we've been going through the list one by one. I can tell you, and Mimi, maybe you might want to expand on this. We have even organizations that have asked for them to stay in the queue, but for this time they don't need any money because they're getting their dollars elsewhere under the COVID umbrella. So Mimi, if you want to speak to that, and also just to let you know that we do have organizations that have gone to online. They've submitted their bills, and of course they are a lot cheaper than holding the actual festivals or the actual super crawls. And so they're submitting a lot less for their ask, but again, they only get 30% of whatever that budget is. And again, they stay in the queue for next year. So if COVID disappears tomorrow and next year everything's 100%, then all the organizations that came in for a lot less money this year will go back to the original ask, and then they go through the process that way. So maybe you might want to accentuate some of the organizations that have, number one, said we don't need the funding this year. Number two, they have come in with a lot less ask, and I'm pretty confident that we will be coming in with a huge savings this year.
Mimi, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Through you, the chair. We do have. We've had organizations, as you can see in the appendix, which actually have withdrawn their application because, and I have to acknowledge publicly our community as a whole, who've really banded together. These organizations came forward and say, we've gotten additional funding, there's emergency funding available. We do not require CEF funds at this time, so we withdraw our application to allow that money to go back into the reserve or to help other community groups. Great example of this is Food Share, who withdrew applications and said, you know what, we want to make sure that the community is thriving. Well, hats off to them. And we do have a few other organizations that did this. Another example we do have of Pride Hamilton was a fabulous example. Wonderfully, when in our discussions with them and working with them, they had a much larger ask, but with COVID, when it hit, They needed to come up with an innovative way to really pivot their program, which they did successfully, where they actually brought it online, and they did not need as many dollars as they had initially requested. And so they came back with a modified now overall program budget, and then following along the guidelines, we calculated 30% of that program budget rather than the initial overall larger program budget. So I hope that those are some examples which kind of showcase across the board what a lot of our community groups have done, and they've really come up with innovative and very creative ways in order to make it work within the funding allocations that were made. And I should say, to be very clear, all funding allocations were made prior to COVID actually hitting. So it was all made, allocations were made according to consistent rationale. And we stuck with that so that it's fair and consistent across the board. And with so many different moving parts, with programs being modified, postponed, in a holding pattern, waiting for more information, receiving additional funding, it truly has been working with each of the applicants on a case-to-case basis. And if I can just take this little time also just to publicly acknowledge not the community of how well they've really responded, and we've been able to work together, as well as the City Enrichment Fund staff who have worked long and tiresome hours, and especially during COVID, some of them have been redeployed and are working 2, if not 3 roles at this time to ensure that we are serving the community in every step of the way. You know, I just wanted to say that too.
And thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Mimi, so well done. I think the staff has gone above and beyond, just helping those organizations that are thinking outside the box. This is not a copy and paste year, but they are doing their just absolutely phenomenal work. And the organizations are very relieved that the City of Hamilton still supports them, even though they don't need money this year, but they know that next year that they, as I said, if it disappears, then they're back in the queue and they're ready to go. Anyways, those are my comments, and I'm willing to move this at the appropriate time.
Thank you. We have no further speakers. Great leadership, Mimi, when you recognize members of your team. So thank you very much. We need an e-vote on that report, which is 8.4. It's up now. Councillor Ferguson, are you able to vote, please? Thank you. Thank you, that carries. We're on to item 8.5. Citizen advisory committees and electronic participation during the COVID-19 emergency. May I please have a mover and a seconder to get this item up, please? Moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Johnson. Thank you. Thank you. We have a time for discussion on this item, and I'm going to go to Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at Appendix B on page 2, actually page 1 and 2. So at the bottom of the page, it has the Committee Against Racism, and it talks about relaunching a non-physical public engagement activity for hate mitigation and prevention in the Hamilton Anti-Racism Resource Center projects. Talks about the committee being a key stakeholder, engaging, et cetera, et cetera. When I look to the left of that last box, it says the LGBTQ Advisory Committee, and there is nothing in either of the boxes referencing that committee.
That's right. Is it Clerk Holland here who's speaking to it? Yes. Clerk Holland.
Through the chair. Good morning. Yes,
Good morning.
unfortunately, when the report was published, I didn't recognize that it was a page split at that point. The LGBTQ community, it is suggesting, staff are suggesting that we do start that committee up in phase 2 due to some staff resourcing concerns under the Jody Koch, who's the manager of, or sorry, the director of talent and diversity. She has some resource concerns starting up that committee for phase 2. So staff are recommending that for the time being, John Ario's group takes support for that committee in order for us to be able to bring that up in phase 2.
Okay, so John is now going to be managing the Community Against Racism, but also the LGBTQ Advisory Committee?
He does have some staff within his group who can help support that temporarily until Jody's redeployed staff are able to return.
Okay. Hang on one second. They're drilling holes in the wall here and my door's open. It's always interesting.
Better to be in the wall than in your mouth or whatever.
Yeah, amen. Now you're grossing me out.
I know.
Is John on the line? John Ariel?
Yes.
Yes, he is. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, John. So I have a question. I wanted the relaunch of HARC. I'd like to know roughly where that is, but I wanted to confirm that the Committee Against Racism is still intimately involved in that, because there was talk in the beginning of the year that it was removed from their work plan. So if we can just get clarification.
Yes, good morning, councillors. We've issued out a survey that went out to the public to get their sense of, what the qualifications of the consultants should be and the community advisory panel. And so the survey has closed. So we're working currently with procurement to get that out to the market. We're targeting next Wednesday to get that out. The work of the Committee Against Racism, they will still be very much involved in this, but because of the COVID impact and not being able to meet, we were not able to really engage them on this. But as the committee itself will be restarting as part of phase 2, their work is still very much connected to HARC in terms of supporting and also advising on that work moving forward.
Yes, it was, and I was intimately involved in the first round, and I worked with the Committee Against Racism, and I wanted to verify that HARC was still a part of their work plan, because they were the ones that were so intimately involved in the creation of HARC and advocating for HARC. I was concerned when I heard that they were moving on to other items while we were doing all of the consultations. So I'm hearing from you that they're still going to be involved.
Absolutely, Councillor. I mean, the work of CAR, how far they've moved HARC forward for a very long time. There's no way. I mean, they will be still be part of effort to relaunch that center moving forward. So, there's definitely no way that that work can be separated from CAR. They will be supporting that work.
Thank you. And can I just ask verification, Madam Chair, if I may? When the survey that John spoke of, that was a public survey about the competencies that are required for the consultant and the board members, et cetera, when was that survey completed?
The survey launched June 16th and was done at the June 30th. So it's was open for 2 weeks until the end of June.
Okay. Madam Chair, I have to say this publicly because it's a concern for me. HARC was supposed to be up and running in the end of June. So I know COVID came in March and we got hit with it, but January, February, and March, we lost a lot of time, and I'm frustrated that the consultation didn't happen until June, when we had indicated to the broader community that the consultation was going to be beginning early in the year. So I'll just put it out there. I understand all of the challenges, but we made some very clear commitments in terms of how this anti-racism resource center was going to get launched and how we were going to consult and how quickly it was going to be up and running. And we're now past the deadline, and HARC is not up and running. And so I understand the challenges that John has had, but I'm frustrated that early in the year, we could have done the consultation on the competencies for the board, the competencies for the consultant. We could have started the RFP. We could have easily started the RFP process looking for board members. And that was the original intention. And somehow it fell off the rail dramatically. And so I am disappointed that we are so far behind schedule. And I cannot blame it all on COVID, because the reality is we had January and February, we had work to do and it didn't get done. So I just want to put it on the record that I'm disappointed that this has transpired. And I hope that we can continue now to expedite this process so that we can get it up and running to serve the broader community.
If I just can also respond very quickly, Councillor, I totally share your frustration on this. I think the challenge for us was we had a public meeting set up for March, but they were all canceled because of COVID. And also I have to say that there's some other work that is going on relating to HARC. For example, the $53,000 from McMaster University. We've been working with them to get that transferred to the city, which has been completed, as well as the dissolution of the HARC and the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, as well as the city's agreement. That also has been very advanced as well. We've been doing a lot of engagement meetings with members of the Hamilton Center for Civic Inclusion, as well as with McMaster University. There's some other work going on underneath as part of supporting this work. But the reason why we didn't hold that meeting in March, like I've said, we had COVID. But on top of that COVID, a lot of the members that we should be getting feedback from, as we know from the COVID data in terms of the impact on racialized communities, it would be sort of seen as tone deaf if it were to forge ahead and not get their feedback, or almost disrespectful as well to the community by not really taking some time to get their feedback respectfully on that process. So I think by the time we look into all our work plan and schedules, this time around seems to be the most feasible. We've already received that feedback, like I said, and we're issuing that RFP next week.
Madam Chair, my concerns still stand. If the city manager is online, Madam City Manager, I'm profoundly disappointed that we are so far behind schedule on this project, on a project where we made personal commitments to the broader community to move forward with those consultations early in 2020. This should not have happened. And so I'm hoping that the city manager will make sure that from this point forward, everything lines up and we start getting the things done according to the schedule that we had planned. I'm frustrated that COVID is being used as an excuse. We had the diversity inclusion office working with myself on the file, and then it was moved to the city manager's office, and another staff person took over the file, and then everything that we had set up just kind of fell off the rails. And that's incredibly frustrating when we worked for an entire year to build some modicum of respect from the broader community, from the racialized community, that we were moving forward in this manner and we were going to answer all of their concerns. And then it's like 6 months behind now, and it shouldn't have happened. So that's all I'm going to say. I've raised it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. There's nobody else in the queue for questions, so I would like to hand over the chair, if I may. Councillor Clark, you're the vice.
Sure, by all means.
Thank you so much. Through to you, Chair Clark, to Andrea. same appendix, the Aboriginal Advisory Committee, the Mundalization, the Status of Women, the Seniors Advisory Committee, the Immigrant and Refugee Committee, Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities. Under the rationale, am I reading it correctly, Andrea, that the reason we're not primarily entertaining these committees is we have a staffing vacancy? Is that primarily the thing that's withholding us moving forward on that?
Through the chair. So there are a number of items occurring in Jody's area. There is a staff vacancy area, but she also has administrative staff who help support these committees who've been redeployed to help with the emergency for the COVID.
I understand people are working multiple jobs. I just want to publicly state my discomfort with waiting to phase 3. I think these are the very communities from which we need to hear from now. I get the sense we're all operating as best as we try and do our outreach in a cocoon. And the health impact of COVID, of course, is immediately the virus. But I know what we're going to be encountering many years or months down the road are related health issues. And I worry that we're not able to directly hear from the very people who may be suffering the most, and how our policies, how our efforts to pivot, how our efforts to deliver service and to hear from these people, particularly during this time, we're not having a way in which to do that. Immigrant and Refugee Committee, issues like translation and language, and are they understanding and receiving the kind of services they need, issues of access, people with disabilities, hearing from them on matters of our boarding of HSR and how we're proposing to do that. Status of women, we absolutely know there's plenty of evidence showing that this is impacting women who are having to remain home and subjected increasingly so to domestic violence, women who are impacted more so economically than their male counterparts. I think it's a gross oversight if we didn't try and allocate some resources to engaging these committees. And I just wanted to state that publicly. This is a very vulnerable and unique time for all, and hence we need to be hearing from these people. So I'll take back the chair, and I will hand it back as to second time speaker to Councillor Clark.
That I have, and I'm not sure, you're going to have to decide whether or not this is in line. So we're talking about the City Citizen Advisory Committee and electronic participation during COVID. The question that I have is how are we moving to ensure that residents can engage in that manner on our standing committees? So the simple civic engagement of our residents. So far, the only civic engagement that we've had are a few letters that have come in. We have not had people speaking to the General Issues Committee, to my knowledge anyways. So how are we ensuring that residents have that opportunity? I think of the Commonwealth Games, which was brought up at the last GIC meeting. If we don't have that civic engagement, then we're falling down. And so we have to make sure that residents have an opportunity. So how are we going to be doing that?
Clerk Andrea, would you like to take that question? Or if City Manager Smith is online, I'll let you folks figure that out.
Through the chair, I'll speak to that, Madam Chair. Currently, we're working with Councillor Danko, who's going to be bringing a motion forward. I believe he's going to be bringing it to Council on the 17th, and a motion to amend the procedural bylaw for that as well.
And so
if that amendment to the procedural bylaw passes at Council, then we would be allowing virtual participation for citizens at standing committee.
Okay, I look forward to that. I'm surprised that we haven't already done that. Other municipalities have done it. So we need to catch up. Thank you.
There are no other speakers, right? Okay, thank you.
So, oh, sorry, Madam Deputy Mayor. So do we need to amend that report showing that LGBTQ Advisory Committee, and I think I got that all messed up, is in phase 2 because the chart doesn't show it. Do we have to amend that?
Clerk Angela is telling me no, she's made a note of it. It was a page break. It was more of a clerical error, but we all appreciate you pointing that out so the public can hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, I think
yes.
you were.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize because I hope Andrea is still there. I tried clicking in and now it tells me I'm in, but before it wouldn't.
You're in.
Has Andrea left? No, Andrea, hi. So I just want to ask the question, why is it that the request to have public delegations at committee meetings having to go by motion now? Like, why would it not have been just a standard process through the clerk's department? I'm confused. I think any one of us would have brought a motion forward at a much earlier time. Now to hear that a councillor is bringing a motion forward to address this is a little bit frustrating. So if you can just answer that, I'd appreciate it.
Clerk Andrea.
Through the chair, our process currently is that any amendments to the procedural bylaw, generally we would bring them annually and we would amend the bylaw. Throughout COVID, what we've tried to do is pivot when we felt that it was necessary for us to amend the bylaw. In March, we amended the bylaw as soon as the province allowed council members to participate fully electronically. We amended the bylaw. We've amended the bylaw along the way as staff have been able to support electronic participation at the different levels. Our next step was to do heritage, committee of adjustment, public meetings, public statutory meetings at planning. So we're trying to move along linearly as we can try to start to support this new process. It has been a learning for staff and it does require more resources. So far, we've been able to do that within our current complement, and we're going to be working with IT as well. There is some technology, but it does take more staff resources to support this technology. All the technology is doing is allowing us to do it. So as we are able to learn along the way, we are bringing the technology forward.
Steve, hang on a second. Yeah,
and bringing the participation in.
Thank you for that. Okay, bye now.
Councillor Pearson, are you? Just thank you. Councillor Pearson is just momentarily unavailable. There are no more speakers, so I'm just going to wait 1 minute to ensure Councillor Pearson is finished with her questions before we move on. Okay. I think we're going to move to the, we've given her a minute. I think we'll move to the vote. Okay. We need an e-vote. Please indicate your vote now. Councillor Pearson, if you can hear me, just to let you know, we're voting on report 8.5. Councillor Pearson? Okay, so we'll mark that. Yeah, we're going to, okay, we'll mark her absent and we'll move on. Thank you, members of committee. Okay, thank you. We're going to move, no, that was carried. We have no motions and we have no notices of motion. Item 11, general information, other business. Let's see where I am. Is there a discussion on the amendments to the outstanding business list, members of committee? Councillor
I'll move it.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Partridge, very much. Seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Just wait one moment and we will have an e-vote on that. It's loading and it's, please. Councillor Vanderbeek? Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, that carries. Private and confidential committee members, would you like to go into closed session to discuss this report? No, we're hearing no one.
Yes.
Oh, yes, Councillor Clark would like to go into closed session. Okay. May I have a motion to move into closed session pursuant to section 8.1 subsections A, B, D, and F of the city's procedural bylaw 18-270 as amended, and section 239 subsections A, B, D, and F of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to the security of the property of the municipality or local board. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that mover. So I had a mover in Councillor Clark to go into closed session, and it is seconded by Councillor Pearson. An e-vote to do so, please. Councillor Partridge?
It's not coming up. It's not coming up on my screen for some reason, but
you have a thumbs up? Yep.
Sure.
And I'm a thumbs up too. I already moved to the closed session and I can't.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
So Councillor Clark and Councillor Partridge, thumbs up, please. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. Members of the public, the meeting will continue following the closed session portion of the meeting, and you can see, you'll be able to see members of council rejoin that meeting. And we will wait up to 5 minutes upon reconvening in open session before proceeding with the meeting to provide members of the public and the media time to return. All, can you please ensure that you're in a private room for this part of the agenda? We're officially going live.
Hello, everyone. It's Lorraine here. I'm just letting you know that we are making sure we are properly out of closed before we start up, although we are live, I understand. So, yep, we are live. So just give us a few moments, please. Thank you.
The live streams are back on, members of committee and members of the public, and I believe Councillor Partridge has a. Do you have a question, Councillor Partridge?
Yes. Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. The speaker indicator is not allowing me to indicate when to speak. So my apologies if I just keep waving my hands at everybody.
Sorry, I didn't see you.
No, that's fine. Like I say, the speaker indicator is not working on eScribe. I'm not really sure why on my particular thing. But the other thing I would like to see is, there's been a few times during this meeting where there's been conversation between the chair and the clerk. And I'm just, I think, usually when the clerk has something to say, the rest of the committee and the public can hear it. So I would just like to hear part of that conversation. And I think it would be beneficial for the public as well to just understand that part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now in, as I noted, in open session, so I need a mover and a seconder to approve. Okay, I might get my glasses on. To approve the following. A, that the contents of report AUD 20006 respecting the city auditor reporting on serious matters to council be received and remain confidential. We have a mover in Councillor Pearson and seconder Councillor Ferguson. Thank you both. We require an e-vote for that, which will be up in 2 shakes of a lamb. I didn't listen to my own instructions. Thank you. Vote was carried. Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Councillor Pearson. We also need an E vote for that.
Before we get cut off, good meeting, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Oh, you're always kind and generous.
My pleasure.
That carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Bye.
Thank you to clerks.